I have to ask you about what me and CJ describe as probably one of the biggest geopolitical happenings of my lifetime since the fall of the Soviet Union, and that is the Biden administration's unhinged war that they were trying to plan against China and Russia. You had Nancy Pelosi visit Taiwan, even though China warned that Taiwan is their that's the red flag. That's the thing
Red
that
line, red line.
escalates the war. Red line, yeah. And you
Hmm.
had Kevin McCarthy that just visited Taiwan as well. You even had all the progressives in Congress that agreed to send weapons to Taiwan. That's tied with all the progressives also unanimously supporting the war in Ukraine, which there's no end game for the West other than endless war with Russia and possible World War III. You had a doomsday clock right now that is closest to midnight. We are closest to nuclear war than ever before because of the actions of the West. So I want to get your take on the Biden administration's push for war with Russia, China, and what the left is getting wrong about Ukraine and Taiwan, in your opinion, Ajamu. Very broad question to end this off today, but I'm very interested in your thoughts about the geopolitical situations we're in.
No, no, it's a very important conversation. We have to talk about all the time because, as you said, um, we are very close to a complete catastrophe for humanity, and that's why I make the argument that right now the U.S. Represents an existential threat to collective humanity. These amateurs that are making U.S. policies are such that they have painted themselves into a strategic corner. They hyped up the rhetoric. They defined victory in Ukraine as a military defeat of the Russian Federation. When everybody who had just a cursory understanding of the balance of forces between Ukraine, even with Western support, and Russia, knew that this was not going to probably happen, and that it was going to end up with the complete destruction of the Ukrainian state. And that's exactly what has happened. But instead of them trying to find an off ramp to de escalate, they instead did the opposite. When there was a possibility after a month of fighting for some kind of negotiated settlement that would have still recognized the possibility of the Ukrainians recouping some of the territory that they had lost. They told Boris Johnson to fly over to Turkey and tell Zelensky basically, if you negotiate seriously with the Russians, we won't be able to protect you, meaning you will be taken out by your own people, in essence. Okay. And so they took a hard line. They told them, look, take a hard line. We guarantee you support, et cetera, et cetera. And the result is that hundreds of thousands of people have lost their lives unnecessarily. And now where are they at? Well, now the reality of the military defeat is something they can no longer avoid. And now there was an article that came out in Politico the other day where now they're conditioning the U.S. population to be ready to accept that there's going to be a negotiation and that they're going to abandon in a fashion very similar to how they abandoned the people in Afghanistan. That they're going to abandon the Ukrainians, and so if that happens, then we can avoid a global catastrophe. But you also have the hawks who are taking the position that they're going to continue no matter what. That what they might accept would be a temporary truce, um, while they then rearm Ukraine. And now you have the NATO Secretary General making a comment a few days ago that with some support that there should be that Ukraine should be brought into NATO immediately, which means then that any confrontation between the Russian Federation and Ukraine gets redefined under Article 5 as a confrontation between Russia and NATO, with all of that could imply in terms of escalation. The same kind of madness is happening with their policies on China. That this notion of escalating tensions with China over Taiwan, violating what was policy for 30 years in terms of their one China policy, it's almost like it's suicidal. That even from the point of view of the bourgeoisie, it's counterproductive.
Mhm.
Just like how they have now undermined the international confidence in the dollar. And it's almost like they're surprised now that people are trying to move toward uh, complete dependency on the dollar as the currency of international exchange. You did it yourself. You stole people's money. You use the dollar dependency as a weapon, imposing economic sanctions. And people are saying, in order for us to have any kind of economic sovereignty, we've got to disconnect from the dollar. So this warmongering is part of the desperation on the part of elements in the U.S., the bourgeois, the capitalist class, desperately trying to maintain their global hegemony, and they don't have a clue as to how to do it. And so they fall back on the only thing that they think they have an understanding of, which is militarism. And here it is, they are depending on militarism and the possibility of engaging in a two-theater conflict with the
Mhm.
Russians and the Chinese. And they couldn't even do it in the early 2000s when they lost in Afghanistan and in Iraq.
Yes.
And now they're going to take on two powers that can challenge. I mean, this is insanity. It's
Insane.
absolute insanity. So we've got to put a break on these maniacs, or we are all in trouble.
Once again, I love the way you put it, and this is why we put our boot on the necks of the NATO left. People were like, oh, people were like, why are you going after Marianne Wilson or over her take on Ukraine? Small disagreement. Why are you guys upset over Bernie and AOC over their position on the Ukraine? I'm like, these are enough small.
Bill Fletcher, and Howie Hawkins,
Yeah, Howie
Yes.
and
Hawkins.
their
Oh.
Ukrainian Solidarity Network.
Jesus fucking. So and we there was a big split. I know you probably felt this during Russiagate as well, where I call them progressive shit libs because they are liberals. They got progressive minds on America for all and other stuff, but they fall for every single State Department war talking point. And there was this split where they're like, "Why are you guys making a big deal over Russiagate?" Because we knew where Russiagate would lead to. We knew that
Exactly.
Russiagate would lead to this. And you guys know
Exactly.
the same people on the progressive shit lib left that pushed Russiagate, they're the same people who got Ukraine wrong. You guys think that's a coincidence? That's not a coincidence. So we need to stop pretending that these are small disagreements. Yes, we agree on Medicare for all. Yes, we agree on increased minimum wage, lower housing standards. But those agreements are small compared to the disagreements on these geopolitical events. You guys heard how Ajamu described it. What is going on right now is crazy what the United States is doing. And if you aren't on board with that regarding sending weapons to Taiwan, like all the progressives done, sending weapons to Nazis in Ukraine, like all of them has done, that is not a small disagreement. That is something that's going to destroy your legacy more than you guys think it will, and that's something that should separate the left because we should not tolerate that. But anyway, I love the
I
way. Go ahead, JBCJ.
yeah.
Well,
I go ahead, JB, and then I'll chime in here. Go
well,
ahead.
no, I just wanted to make one point, and to what you said, Nick, is the fact that if they are, game for sending weapons to Nazis in Ukraine, that means you're game for sending weapons to people who want to end our lives. And that is why it's so important, because why in the world would you send weapons to Nazis thousands of miles away? That's no different than sending Nazis to the neighborhood next door.
And those guns going to flood the black markets. It's not only just us; they're endangering the black global working class because now there's reports from the DHS. Sorry to cut y'all, Jay, because you're making a great point. Where these guns are going to be flooded in the black markets. You're going to have neo Nazis that have networks in Ukraine because you got neo Nazis in Brazil. You got neo Nazis all over Europe that travel in Ukraine. They all going to have access to these black market guns that they're going to bring back home. It's so dangerous what they're playing with. But sorry, JB, I want you to continue because that was.
But can I jump in real quick on that point?
Yeah, go ahead.
And that's why we say to the young brothers in Tennessee, please understand what is happening here. Understand that if you take a principled position on the issue of guns and gun violence, you got to connect that to the gun violence in the form of warmongering. Okay, that is the logical, political, and moral connection. If you don't do that, then basically you are allowing yourself to be used as an instrument against your own folks. Okay, we all want to see a elimination of violence, but the issue of violence in U.S. culture goes even deeper than the accessibility of weapons. Okay,
That's a good
so we've got to understand that when you talk about that point that JB made in terms of them sending guns and resources abroad to Nazis, we connect that to the militarization of the domestic army that we call the police. And their job, basically, many of them are Nazis and white supremacists, is to control and to contain us and other colonized people. These connections have to be made. That's part of the responsibility of developing this international perspective. And we call on the brothers in Tennessee, be careful, because they will corrupt and control you and use you like they did Barack Obama as a weapon against your own folks.
AFRICOM Watch Bulletin. Could you talk about what that is on the website? And I have the most recent one up here on the screen.
Yep. That's the connection we are making here. That basically one aspect of our campaign is to bring attention to the existence of the U.S. Africa Command. The U.S. in their colonial arrogance they have divided up the entire planet into various command structures. And so we are putting a focus on AFRICOM, which is a U.S. command structure, where the U.S. has forces in Africa, theoretically to assist in anti-terrorism and all this kind of nonsense, but basically is there as an instrument of U.S. foreign policy. Every place we have seen AFRICOM, we have seen not a de-escalation, but an escalation in violence. So again, we say, if you want to be concerned about, you should be concerned about increased violence and militarization of the domestic army we call the police in the U.S. You can't understand that unless you understand the point that JB made, that this is happening globally, and you have to understand what's happening on the African continent. You have to understand what's happening in the Americas through Southcom. You have to understand that in their national security strategy, they put at the center of this their commitment to what they call full spectrum dominance. And the strategy that they're using to maintain their global hegemony is militarism. These folks are fighting for their interests. They're waging war to maintain their dominance. We have to understand, as working class people, as African people, that they are waging war against us also, and that we cannot tolerate and can't afford this to continue to be a one-sided war.
That's how I view it. That's why I'm so passionate when I see them bomb other country. I view them they're going to war with us. They're going to war with humanity.